My name is Sarah, and I'm 33 years old. Last Christmas, I thought I was finally going to have the perfect family dinner where I could share some amazing news. I'd just gotten engaged to the love of my life, Marcus, and received a promotion at work that I'd been working toward for almost 4 years. I was so excited to tell my family, thinking maybe this time, just maybe, my mom would finally be proud of me. But instead, what happened that night changed everything between us forever. And honestly, it was probably the best thing that could have happened to me. Before I dive into what went down that Christmas evening, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. Trust me, what my mother said next will shock you, but my response shocked her even more. Growing up, I was always the middle child in a family where being middle meant being invisible. My older brother, Daniel, was the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong in my mother, Catherine's eyes. He's a surgeon now, and she never lets anyone forget it. My younger sister, Emma, was the baby, the precious little princess who got away with everything and grew up to become a successful architect. And then there was me, Sarah, stuck right in the middle, desperately trying to figure out how to earn even a fraction of the attention and love they seemed to get so effortlessly. From the time I was old enough to understand family dynamics, I knew I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. While Daniel got praised for bringing home B's, I had to maintain straight A's just to get a nod of acknowledgement. When Emma threw tantrums and broke things, it was cute and she was just expressing herself. When I so much as raised my voice, I was being disrespectful and needed an attitude adjustment. I remember spending countless hours in high school working part-time jobs at the local bookstore and tutoring younger kids. Not because we needed the money, but because I thought if I could contribute financially, maybe my parents would see my value. I saved every penny to buy my mom flowers on Mother's Day, jewelry for her birthday, and thoughtful Christmas gifts that I'd spend weeks picking out. Daniel and Emma would grab something last minute from the mall, and somehow their gifts were always the ones that got the biggest smiles and the longest hugs. College was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to prove myself in a field I was passionate about. I chose communications and public relations because I loved the strategy behind building relationships and crafting messages that could genuinely help organizations connect with their communities. But when I told my family about my major, my mother's face fell like I'd just announced I was dropping out entirely. Communications, she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. That's not a real career, Sarah. That's just glorified party planning. Why can't you be more like Daniel and choose something that actually saves lives, or like Emma, something that requires real creativity and makes a tangible difference in the world? Those words stung more than I let on at the time. But I pushed through, graduated summa cum laude, and landed my first job at a mid-sized PR firm in downtown Seattle. I worked my way up slowly, taking on extra projects, staying late, coming in early, proving myself over and over again. Every small victory, every client I secured, every campaign that succeeded, I'd call home excited to share the news. The conversations always ended the same way. That's nice, dear. Did I tell you Daniel just published another research paper? Or Emma just won another design award? She's really making a name for herself in sustainable architecture. For years, I kept trying. I sent cards for every holiday, called every week, remembered birthdays and anniversaries. I helped my parents move into their new condo in Bellevue when I was 27, spending my entire vacation time painting walls and organizing boxes while my siblings were too busy with their important careers to help. I pet sat their golden retriever whenever they went out of town, even though I'm mildly allergic, and would spend the entire weekend with watery eyes and a runny nose. 2 springs ago, when my dad, James, had to have emergency heart surgery, I was the one who took time off work to drive him to appointments and sit with my mom in the waiting room for 8 hours. Daniel was in surgery himself that day, and Emma was presenting to a major client. But somehow, I was the one who got lectured later about how I should have coordinated better with my siblings to keep them informed. The worst part wasn't even the lack of recognition. It was the constant comparison, the way every conversation somehow circled back to how much more successful, more attractive, more accomplished my siblings were. Family dinners became exercises in endurance, sitting there listening to endless praise for achievements that honestly weren't any more impressive than my own, but were treated like Pulitzer Prize wins because they came from the golden children. But this past year, things in my life finally started clicking into place. Marcus and I had been dating for almost 3 years, and he proposed during a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands in September. The ring was vintage and perfect, and more importantly, he saw me in a way my family never had. He celebrated my wins at work, encouraged my creative side projects, and never once made me feel like I had to compete for his attention or approval. Around the same time, my firm promoted me to communications director, which came with a substantial salary increase and the opportunity to lead strategic initiatives for our biggest clients. It was everything I'd been working toward, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt genuinely proud of what I'd accomplished. I couldn't wait to share both pieces of news with my family at Christmas, thinking that maybe this time would be different. Christmas morning started the way it always did at my childhood home on Pine Ridge Drive. The house was decorated exactly the same way it had been for the past 25 years. White lights on the noble fir tree in the living room, burgundy and gold ornaments that my mother had collected over the decades, and the same crystal angel topper that had been in our family since I was 7. The smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee filled the air, and Christmas music played softly from the sound system built into the kitchen. I arrived around 10:30 in the morning, my arms full of carefully wrapped presents and my heart full of nervous excitement. Marcus was spending Christmas with his own family in Vancouver, but we'd planned to celebrate together when he got back. I'd been carrying my engagement ring in my purse for the past 3 months, wanting to announce it in person rather than over the phone. My dad greeted me at the door with one of his warm bear hugs. James has always been the more emotionally available parent, the one who remembered to ask about my job and actually listened to the answers. "There's my communications director," he said, taking the presents from my arms. "How's the new position treating you?" I lit up. "Actually, Dad, I have some really exciting news to share with everyone." "Oh yeah, can't wait to hear it, sweetheart." My mom appeared in the doorway, wearing the cashmere cardigan I'd bought her for her birthday last year. She looked me up and down with that expression I knew so well, the one that somehow managed to find fault before I'd even said hello. "Sarah, what on earth are you wearing? That red sweater makes you look washed out. Didn't I tell you that color doesn't work with your complexion? And your hair looks like you slept on it wrong." "Merry Christmas to you too, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "I actually spent an hour styling my hair this morning." "Well, you should have spent two," she replied, turning back toward the kitchen. "Emma looks absolutely radiant in her new emerald dress. You should ask her where she shops." My sister Emma was already in the living room, looking indeed stunning in a perfectly tailored emerald dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She worked for a prestigious architectural firm downtown and had the wardrobe to match. Daniel was sitting on the couch in his expensive watch and designer sweater, scrolling through his phone and checking messages from the hospital. "Look who finally decided to show up," Emma said with a smirk. "We've been waiting to start presents." "I'm literally 10 minutes late because I stopped to get gas," I replied, but nobody seemed to be listening. The gift exchange went exactly as I'd expected. Daniel gave everyone gift cards he'd obviously picked up at the last minute, but they were expensive ones from high-end stores, so Mom gushed about how thoughtful and generous he was. Emma had bought our parents a weekend getaway to some luxury spa resort in the mountains, which earned her 20 minutes of praise and excited planning conversations. I'd spent weeks picking out personalized gifts for everyone. A vintage medical journal I'd found at an estate sale for Daniel, a beautiful leather portfolio for Emma with her initials embossed in gold, and a custom photo book for my parents filled with family pictures from the past decade that I'd spent hours digitizing and restoring. "Oh, how nice," my mother said, flipping through the photo book quickly. "This must have taken you some time." "I spent about 60 hours on it," I said. "I had to scan all the old photos and restore some of the damaged ones, then design all the layouts and write captions for each section." "That's sweet, dear. Daniel, show everyone that new smartwatch your colleague gave you for being the lead surgeon on that groundbreaking procedure." And just like that, the conversation moved on. My dad squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "This is incredible, Sarah, thank you." But the moment had already passed. As the morning turned into afternoon, more family members arrived. My Aunt Jennifer and Uncle Mark, my cousins Jessica and James Jr., and my grandmother rose. The house filled with laughter and conversation, and I found myself gravitating toward the kitchen, helping my mother with dinner preparations like I always did. The ham needs to come out in 30 minutes, she instructed, not looking up from the potatoes she was mashing. And someone needs to set the dining room table. Where's Emma? She's in the living room talking to Grandma Rose. Well, she shouldn't have to worry about kitchen work. She's had such a demanding week with that new project. I bit my tongue. I'd worked just as many hours that week, including staying late twice to handle client emergencies, but somehow that never seemed to factor into these calculations. As dinner time approached, I felt my nerves building. I'd planned to make my announcement during dessert when everyone would be relaxed and in a good mood. I kept touching the ring box in my purse, reminding myself that this was good news, happy news, the kind of news that should bring families together. But as I watched my mother light up every time Daniel mentioned his latest surgical success, or Emma talked about her firm's newest sustainable building project, I started to wonder if I was setting myself up for disappointment once again. Dinner was served at 3:00 sharp, just like every Christmas for as long as I could remember. The dining room table was set with my mother's finest china, the same Waterford pattern she'd been using for special occasions since I was a child. Grandma Rose sat at one end, my father at the other, and the rest of us filled in the sides according to an unspoken hierarchy that somehow always put me between my youngest cousin and the empty chair, where my grandfather used to sit before he passed away 5 years ago. The conversation flowed easily around topics I'd heard 100 times before. Daniel's new position as chief of cardiovascular surgery at Seattle Children's Hospital, Emma's recent award for innovative green design, my cousin Jessica's wedding planning for next summer. I participated when spoken to, laughed at my Uncle Mark's bad jokes, and complimented my Aunt Jennifer's new haircut, all while waiting for the right moment to share my own news. So, Sarah, my grandmother said during a lull in conversation, are you still working at that public relations company downtown? Communications firm, Grandma, and yes, I am. Actually, I have some exciting news about that. Before I could continue, my mother jumped in. Sarah thinks managing social media accounts is the same as having a real career. I keep telling her she should go back to school for something more substantial, like healthcare administration or education. Communications is a real career, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice even. It's actually a field that requires a lot of strategic thinking and crisis management skills. I just got promoted to communications director, which means I'm overseeing all client relationships and leading a team of 12 people. Oh, that's wonderful, honey, my Aunt Jennifer said kindly. Congratulations. Thank you, and actually, I have even bigger news than that. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small velvet box, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. This was it, the moment I'd been planning for months. Marcus proposed, I announced, opening the box to reveal the beautiful vintage ring inside. We're engaged. The reaction wasn't quite what I'd hoped for. There was a moment of silence, then polite congratulations from most of the table. My father's face broke into a genuine smile, and my grandmother reached over to squeeze my hand, but my mother's expression remained unchanged, almost bored. When did this happen? Emma asked. In September. We went to the San Juan Islands for a weekend, and he proposed during a sunset walk on the beach at Roch Harbor. It was absolutely perfect. September, my mother said, her voice sharp. You've been engaged for 3 months and you're just telling us now. I wanted to tell you in person, as a family. Well, that's just typical of you, Sarah. Always so secretive, always keeping things to yourself. No wonder we never know what's going on in your life. I felt the familiar sting of criticism disguised as concern. I'm not secretive, Mom. I call every week. I just wanted this to be special. What does Marcus do again? Daniel asked, though I'd told him at least 4 times in previous conversations. He's a high school history teacher, and he coaches the debate team. A teacher? My mother repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Well, I suppose that's steady employment at least. The way she said it made it clear what she was thinking. Not impressive enough, not successful enough, not good enough for her daughter. Never mind that Marcus was brilliant, kind, funny, and treated me like I was the most important person in his world. He's a wonderful man, my grandmother said firmly. When do we get to meet him properly? Soon, I hope. He's with his family in Vancouver for Christmas, but we're planning to have everyone over for dinner next month. I hope he knows what he's getting into, Emma said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Sarah's always been the dramatic one in the family. I'm not dramatic, I protested, but my mother was already nodding in agreement. Sarah has always been challenging, she said as if I weren't sitting right there. She's never quite figured out how to make things easy on herself or anyone else, always creating problems where there don't need to be any. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I tried to shake them off. This was supposed to be a celebration, a happy moment. I couldn't let them ruin it. Well, I think it's wonderful news, my father said, raising his glass of wine. To Sarah and Marcus, may you be very happy together. A few people raised their glasses half-heartedly, but the moment felt forced and awkward. The conversation quickly moved on to other topics, and I found myself sitting there with the ring box still in my hands, feeling smaller and more insignificant than ever. As dessert was being served, my mother's famous chocolate trifle, she launched into a detailed account of Daniel's latest professional achievements. He'd been invited to speak at an international medical conference, featured in a prominent medical journal, and was being considered for a position on the board of directors at the hospital. Each accomplishment was described in glowing detail, with my mother's pride practically radiating across the table. And Emma, she continued without missing a beat, just won the most prestigious award in sustainable architecture for her innovative housing project. The mayor personally commended her work, and she's been asked to consult on similar projects in Portland and San Francisco. That's amazing, I said, genuinely meaning it. Congratulations, Emma. Thanks, she said, but her attention was already back on her phone. I sat there listening to the praise being heaped on my siblings, waiting for someone to circle back to my engagement or promotion, but it never happened. It was as if I'd never spoken, as if my news didn't matter enough to warrant more than a few seconds of attention. That's when my mother looked directly at me and said the words that would change everything between us forever. You know, Sarah, I've been thinking about this engagement of yours, and I have to be honest, I'm worried about Marcus. The table went quiet, even my cousins looked up from their phones. What do you mean? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. Well, let's be realistic here. You're 33 years old. You work in a field that barely pays the bills despite your fancy new title. You live in that cramped apartment in Capitol Hill, and you've never really accomplished anything truly significant. You're honestly the most disappointing child we have. I just hope Marcus realizes what he's signing up for before it's too late. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every pair of eyes at the table staring at me, waiting to see how I would react. My Aunt Jennifer looked horrified. My father was shaking his head in disbelief. Even Daniel and Emma seemed shocked by the cruelty of the comment. But for the first time in my life, instead of shrinking back and taking it, instead of making excuses or trying to laugh it off, I felt something different rising up inside me. It was anger, yes, but more than that, it was clarity. It was 33 years of suppressed frustration and hurt, finally finding its voice. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling with emotion, and looked my mother directly in the eyes. Then stop calling me when you need money, I said, my voice steady and clear. Her face fell instantly. The silence that followed my words was so complete that I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway and the distant sound of Christmas music still playing in the kitchen. What are you talking about? She asked, but her voice had lost all its earlier authority. I'm talking about the $1,800 I've been sending you every month for the past 2.5 years to cover your mortgage payments, because Dad's consulting business was struggling after his heart attack. I'm talking about the $4,500 I gave you last spring when he needed that specialized cardiac therapy that insurance wouldn't fully cover. I'm talking about the $3,200 I sent to help pay for Emma's graduate school application fees and portfolio preparation, because she'd maxed out her credit cards on that European architecture tour. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, opening my banking app with fingers that were surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Want to see the receipts? I continued, holding up the screen. Because I have them all right here. Every transfer, every check, every emergency loan that somehow never got paid back. My Aunt Jennifer was staring at me with her mouth slightly open. My Uncle Mark had put down his fork and was listening intently. My grandmother was nodding slowly, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. Sarah, my father started, but I wasn't finished. Remember last year when Daniel's private practice loan went into default because his partnership agreement fell through? I continued. Who do you think paid that off? It wasn't mom and dad because they were still dealing with medical bills. It was me. $6,800 that I'd been saving for a house down payment. Daniel's face had gone pale. Sarah, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, because mom made me promise not to tell anyone. She said it would embarrass you and that I should just consider it my contribution to the family. My contribution, as if I haven't been contributing my entire adult life. I turned back to my mother, who was opening and closing her mouth like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. You want to know what kind of man proposes to someone like me? The kind who sees that I've been single-handedly keeping this family financially afloat while working my supposedly meaningless job and living in my supposedly pathetic apartment. The kind who recognizes that maybe, just maybe, I've been sacrificing my own financial security and dreams to take care of everyone else. I never asked you to, my mother began weakly. You absolutely did ask. You called me crying about the mortgage payments. You called me panicking about dad's therapy costs. You called me begging for help with Emma's application fees. And every single time, I helped because that's what families do. But apparently, that's what the disappointing child does while the successful ones get all the credit and none of the responsibility. Emma finally spoke up, her voice small. I didn't know you paid for my applications. Because I wasn't supposed to tell you. Just like I wasn't supposed to tell anyone about the money I've been lending mom and dad, or the payment I made on Daniel's loan, or the countless other times I've bylaid this family out of financial trouble. I opened my banking app and started reading actual numbers and dates, my voice growing stronger with each transaction. November 15, 2021, $1,800 to Catherine Walsh for mortgage payment. December 20, 2021, $1,800 to Catherine Walsh for mortgage payment. January 8, 2022, $2,500 to James Walsh for medical expenses. February 12, 2022, $1,800 to Catherine Walsh for mortgage payment. My father was staring at my mother with an expression I'd never seen before. Catherine, is this true? It's not what it sounds like, she said quickly. Sarah was just helping out temporarily while we got back on our feet after your surgery. Temporarily? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. It's been 2.5 years, Mom. 2.5 years of monthly payments. 2.5 years of me living paycheck to paycheck while you drove around in a car I was helping pay for, complaining about how disappointing your useless daughter is. My grandmother reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Honey, why didn't you tell any of us about this? Because I thought if I could just help enough, if I could just prove my value to this family in some way, maybe I'd finally earn the love and respect that Daniel and Emma seem to get automatically. I thought if I could be useful, even if it was just financially, maybe Mom would stop looking at me like I was a mistake. The tears I'd been holding back for years were finally coming, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of release, of finally speaking a truth I'd been carrying alone for so long. You want to know what Marcus sees in me? I continued, my voice growing stronger. He sees someone who's been working overtime to support her family while they belittle her career. He sees someone who's been giving up her own dreams and financial goals to make sure everyone else in her family is okay. He sees someone who's been the real foundation of this family while being treated like she's worthless. Daniel was shaking his head. Sarah, I had no idea. If I'd known you were the one who paid off my loan. You'd what? You'd have treated me with basic respect? You'd have defended me when Mom made her snide comments? That's all I ever wanted. Not gratitude, not praise, just basic human decency. I turned to Emma, who was staring down at her plate. And you? Do you have any idea how many times I've covered for you? Not just financially, but in every other way. When you were too busy to help Mom pack for their move, who do you think spent her entire weekend doing it? when you were too overwhelmed with work to visit Dad in the hospital, who do you think sat with him for hours? Sarah, my father said quietly. I'm so sorry. I had no idea your mother was asking you for money because she made me promise not to tell you. She said it would hurt your pride and that as the most financially stable one, it was your responsibility to help. Funny how I went from being the most disappointing to the most financially stable, depending on what she needed from me. My mother finally found her voice again. You're being dramatic, Sarah. Families help each other, that's what we do. No, Mom. What families do is support each other emotionally and treat each other with respect. What you do is take my money while telling everyone how disappointing I am. What you do is use me as a financial safety net while treating me like an embarrassment. I stood up and pushed my chair back from the table. Well, congratulations. You're about to find out exactly how disappointing I really am, because as of today, the Bank of Sarah is permanently closed. The aftermath of my revelation was immediate and chaotic. As soon as I announced that I was done being the family's financial safety net, multiple conversations erupted around the table simultaneously. My Aunt Jennifer was demanding to know how long this had been going on. My Uncle Mark was asking my father if he knew about the money. My grandmother was looking at my mother with an expression of deep disappointment. Sarah, wait, my mother said, standing up as I gathered my purse and coat. Let's talk about this privately. There's no need to air our family business in front of everyone. Our family business? I turned back to face her. You mean the family business where you humiliate me in front of these same people every chance you get? The family business where you announce to everyone that I'm the most disappointing child you have? I think they're entitled to know the truth about how this family really operates. You're being vindictive, she accused, but her voice was shaking. I'm being honest. For the first time in my adult life, I'm being completely honest about what's been happening in this family. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. My cousin Jessica spoke up from across the table. Sarah, are you serious about the money? You've really been supporting them financially all this time. Dead serious. I can show you bank statements going back years if you want proof. My father was staring at my mother with a mixture of confusion and anger. Catherine, we need to talk, right now. Not in front of everyone, she hissed. Why not? You had no problem discussing Sarah's failures in front of everyone. You had no problem announcing to the entire table that she's disappointing. So why is it suddenly inappropriate to discuss the truth? Daniel finally spoke up, his voice quiet. Sarah, about my loan? I genuinely didn't know. I thought Mom and Dad had helped me out. I know you didn't know, I said, and I meant it. None of you knew because I was specifically told not to tell you. But Daniel, can I ask you something? In all the years we've been adults, have you ever once asked me if I needed help with anything? Have you ever inquired about my finances, my career struggles, my personal life beyond the bare minimum? He was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally admitted. I guess I assumed you were doing fine. You assumed I was doing fine because it was easier than actually paying attention to my life. Just like it was easier for Emma to assume someone else would handle the family emergencies, and easier for Mom to assume I'd always be there to bail everyone out while she criticized everything about me. Emma finally looked up from her plate. I don't understand why you didn't just say no if you didn't want to help. Because I did want to help, I exclaimed. I wanted to help because I love this family, despite everything. I wanted to help because I thought maybe if I proved my value in some tangible way, I'd finally be treated like I mattered. But I see now that no amount of financial support was ever going to change how you all see me. My grandmother cleared her throat, and the room went quiet. When Rose Walsh spoke, people listened. She'd been the matriarch of our family for as long as I could remember, and her opinion carried weight with everyone. Catherine, she said, her voice stern in a way I rarely heard, I am deeply disappointed in you. This young woman has been sacrificing her own financial security to help this family, and you've been treating her like she's worthless. That's not just ungrateful, it's cruel. Mother, you don't understand the whole situation, my mom started. I understand enough. I understand that Sarah has been working herself to exhaustion to support herself, and apparently half this family, while you've been telling everyone who will listen that she's not good enough. I understand that she just announced her engagement, which should be one of the happiest moments of her life. And instead of celebrating with her, you used it as an opportunity to tear her down. The room was silent, except for the sound of my mother's rapid breathing. I'd never seen her called out so directly by her own mother before. And another thing, my grandmother continued, I've watched this girl grow up, and she's never been anything but kind, generous, and hardworking. If she's the most disappointing child you have, Catherine, then you have no idea how to measure a person's worth. My Aunt Jennifer nodded emphatically. I have to agree with Mom. Sarah, I had no idea you were dealing with all of this. I always wondered why you seemed so tense during family gatherings. I wasn't tense, I said quietly. I was exhausted, emotionally, financially, physically exhausted from trying to be enough for a family that had already decided I never would be. My mother made one last attempt to regain control of the narrative. Sarah, you're making this sound much worse than it is. We're family, we help each other, and I never said you were worthless. You said I was the most disappointing child you have, in front of everyone, after I just told you I was engaged. What exactly would you call that? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. You know what, Mom? It doesn't matter anymore. I'm done trying to earn your approval. I'm done sacrificing my own happiness and financial security for people who don't even see me as a real person. I'm done being the family's safety net while being treated like the family disappointment. I walked toward the door but turned back one more time. My wedding is going to be beautiful. Marcus and I are going to build a wonderful life together, and we're going to do it without the constant criticism and emotional manipulation that I've been accepting as normal for the past 33 years. Anyone who wants to be part of that life with respect and kindness is welcome. Anyone who doesn't can keep my phone number for emergencies, but don't expect me to answer. And with that, I walked out of my childhood home, leaving behind a table full of shocked faces and a mother who was finally experiencing what it felt like to be the one left speechless. The week following Christmas was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. My phone started ringing before I even made it home that evening, and it didn't stop for days. But for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't answering every call immediately. I wasn't dropping everything to manage other people's emotions or solve their problems. Marcus had flown back from Vancouver 2 days early when I called him crying from my car in my parents' driveway. He found me sitting on my couch at midnight, still in my Christmas dress, staring at my phone as it buzzed with incoming calls and text messages. I can't believe I actually did that, I kept saying. I can't believe I finally said all of that out loud. I can, he said, pulling me close. I've been waiting for you to stand up to them for 3 years. I just didn't want to push because I knew you had to get there on your own. But what if I was wrong? What if I was too harsh? Sarah, he said gently, you've been paying your mother's mortgage for 2.5 years while she told people you were disappointing. There's no universe in which you were too harsh. The messages started pouring in that night and continued for days. My father called first, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine regret. Sarah, honey, I had no idea your mother was asking you for money. I'm so sorry, if I'd known. Dad, it's not just about the money. It's about the way she's treated me my entire life. The money was just the final straw. I know, sweetheart, I've been thinking a lot about that since you left. And you're right, I should have stood up for you more over the years. I should have said something when she made those comments. It was the first real apology I'd ever received from anyone in my family, and it meant more than I could express. Daniel called the next day. Sarah, I feel terrible about the loan situation. I want to pay you back. It's not about paying me back, Daniel. It's about the fact that for all these years, you've been perfectly happy to assume that someone else would handle family problems while you focused on your career. You never once asked if I needed help or support. You're right, he said quietly. I guess I always saw you as the strong one, the one who had everything figured out. I was the one who couldn't say no. There's a difference. Emma took 4 days to call, and when she did, she was defensive. I don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this, Sarah. Families help each other out. It's not like anyone forced you to give us money. Emma, do you remember what you said to me at dinner? You said I was the dramatic one in the family. Do you have any idea how that felt, coming right after Mom called me disappointing? I was just joking around, you know that. It wasn't a joke to me. It never is. Do you realize that between you and Daniel, I can't remember the last time either of you said something genuinely supportive about me? The last time you celebrated something good happening in my life? She was quiet for a long moment. I guess I never thought about it that way. That's the problem. None of you think about it. You take my support for granted while treating me like I'm the burden. My mother, predictably, was the most persistent. She called 7 times on December 26th alone, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. Sarah, this is ridiculous. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults. Sarah, you're being incredibly selfish. Your father is upset, and this is affecting the whole family. Sarah, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this attitude needs to stop. We're your family. On December 28th, she tried a different approach. Sarah, honey, I think I may have spoken too harshly at dinner. Maybe we can work something out about the money situation. But it wasn't until December 30th that she finally called and said the words I'd been waiting 33 years to hear. Sarah, I was wrong, I'm sorry. I almost didn't answer the phone. I'd been screening her calls for days, and Marcus had been encouraging me to take my time before engaging. But something about the 11th ring made me pick up. Hello, Mom. Sarah, thank God. Please don't hang up, I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Your father and I have been talking, and I think I owe you an apology, a real one. I waited. What I said at dinner was unforgivable. You're not disappointing. You're the opposite of disappointing. God, Sarah, you've been holding this family together, and I've been treating you terribly. It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I'd ever received from her, but I wasn't ready to let my guard down completely. Mom, it's not just what you said at dinner. It's been a pattern my entire life. The constant criticism, the comparisons to Daniel and Emma, the way you dismiss my career and my accomplishments. I know, she said, and her voice was shaking. I know, and I don't have a good excuse for it. I think maybe I saw myself in you, and I was harder on you because of it. What do you mean? I was the middle child too. I know what it's like to feel invisible. And instead of protecting you from that feeling, I think I made it worse. I think I pushed you harder because I wanted you to be stronger than I was. It wasn't a complete explanation, and it certainly wasn't an excuse, but it was the first time my mother had ever shown me any real vulnerability or self-awareness. The money stops, Mom, all of it. No more mortgage payments, no more emergency loans, no more bailing anyone out. I understand, you're right to stop, we never should have put that burden on you. And the criticism stops too. I'm not going to tolerate being belittled anymore, especially in front of other people. Okay, I'll try to do better. Don't try, Mom, do better. Because if you can't, then Marcus and I will build our life without this family's involvement. It was an ultimatum, but it felt necessary. For the first time in my life, I was setting real boundaries with consequences I was prepared to enforce. 3 months later, my life looked completely different. The constant financial stress was gone, replaced by something I'd never experienced before, actual savings. For the first time since college, I had money left over at the end of each month. Marcus and I opened a joint savings account and started planning not just our wedding, but our future together. The emotional change was even more dramatic. Without the constant weight of family drama and financial obligations, I felt lighter, more confident, more like myself. My performance at work improved noticeably once I wasn't distracted by family emergencies and guilt-inducing phone calls. You seem different lately, my boss, Amanda, said during my quarterly review. More focused, more assertive in client meetings. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. There might be additional opportunities coming up soon. I was doing something I'd never done before, prioritizing my own well-being. The family dynamics shifted dramatically once the financial safety net was removed. My father, it turned out, had been completely unaware of the extent to which my mother had been borrowing money from me. When he discovered the full scope of it, he was furious. 2.5 years, Catherine. You've been taking money from our daughter for 2.5 years without telling me. They ended up going to financial counseling together, something that probably should have happened years earlier. My father took on additional consulting work to supplement their income, and my mother finally admitted they'd been living beyond their means since his heart attack. Daniel and Emma, meanwhile, were forced to confront their own assumptions about family support. Daniel called me 8 weeks after Christmas with an update that surprised me. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he told me, "about how I never asked if you needed help. And you're right, I was so focused on my own problems that I never considered you might have your own struggles. I appreciate you saying that. I want to do better, and I want to start by asking, is there anything you need help with? Anything I can do to support you?" It was such a simple question, but it was the first time any of my siblings had ever asked it. We ended up having a 3-hour conversation about my career goals, my relationship with Marcus, and my plans for the future. For the first time in our adult lives, Daniel seemed genuinely interested in my life as a person rather than just as a family obligation. Emma took longer to come around. She remained defensive about the money situation and seemed to view my boundary setting as a personal attack rather than a necessary change. But even she eventually started to shift her perspective, especially after a long conversation with our grandmother. "Your sister has been sacrificing for this family while you two were building your careers," Rose had told both of my siblings. "The least you can do is treat her with the respect she deserves." My relationship with my mother remained the most complicated. She was clearly trying to change her behavior, but decades of ingrained patterns don't disappear overnight. She'd catch herself mid-criticism and apologize, or make an effort to ask about my work in a way that didn't sound dismissive. It felt forced at first, but gradually it started to feel more genuine. The real test came when Marcus and I started planning our wedding. I'd been dreading the inevitable commentary and attempts to control the process, but to my surprise, my mother mostly kept her opinions to herself. When she did offer suggestions, she prefaced them with things like, "just an idea," or "only if you think it would work." "I really like the venue you chose," she said during one of our planning sessions. "The historic hotel in Snoqualmie has such beautiful gardens. The photos you showed me from their wedding portfolio are stunning." It was such a normal, supportive comment that I almost didn't know how to respond. This was what healthy family interaction was supposed to look like. My father, on the other hand, threw himself into wedding planning with enthusiasm I hadn't expected. He offered to help with costs, insisted on walking me down the aisle, and spent hours researching caterers and photographers with me. It was as if he was trying to make up for years of standing by while my mother criticized me. "I'm so proud of you," he told me one afternoon as we tasted cakes at a bakery in Fremont. "Not just for standing up to your mother, but for building such a good life for yourself. Marcus is a lucky man." Coming from my father, those words meant everything. The biggest surprise was how many other family members reached out to support me once they learned the full story. My Aunt Jennifer started calling regularly just to check in. My cousin Jessica asked if she could help with wedding planning. Even some of my more distant relatives made efforts to connect with me in ways they never had before. "I always sensed there was tension," my Aunt Jennifer explained during one of our phone calls. "But I never realized how unfair it was. Your mother has always been intense, but I didn't know she was being so critical of you while you were helping them financially." It turned out that several family members had noticed the dynamic over the years, but hadn't felt comfortable intervening. My Christmas confrontation had given them permission to address what they'd been seeing but ignoring. The most meaningful change was in my relationship with Marcus's family. Without the constant drain of my own family drama, I was able to invest more emotional energy in building relationships with his parents and siblings. They welcomed me with an openness and warmth that I'd never experienced before. "Your family is so supportive," I told Marcus after a Sunday dinner with his parents, where no one criticized anyone, and everyone seemed genuinely happy to be together. "Yours can be too," he said. "It just takes time and boundaries." He was right. Slowly, carefully, with clear expectations and consequences, some of my family relationships were beginning to heal. Not all of them, and not completely, but enough to give me hope that the future could be different from the past. 8 months after that Christmas dinner, Marcus and I were married in a small ceremony at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel in downtown Seattle. The guest list was carefully curated, including only people who had shown genuine support for our relationship and respect for both of us as individuals. My father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. My grandmother sat in the front row, beaming with pride. My mother was there too, dressed elegantly and behaving perfectly, though I could see the effort it was taking her to hold back her usual commentary. Daniel and Emma both attended and even seemed genuinely happy for us. But the people who mattered most were the ones who had supported me unconditionally. Marcus's family, who had embraced me from the beginning. My Aunt Jennifer and cousin Jessica, who had become real sources of emotional support. And my longtime friends who had watched me struggle with family dynamics for years and were thrilled to see me finally standing up for myself. "You look radiant," my grandmother whispered as she hugged me after the ceremony. "Not just beautiful, but truly happy. That's what I've been waiting to see." During the reception, my father gave a speech that brought me to tears. "Sarah has always been the heart of our family," he said, "even when we didn't appreciate her properly. She's kind, generous, hardworking, and loyal to a fault. Marcus, you're not just marrying a wonderful woman, you're marrying someone who will move heaven and earth for the people she loves. I just hope you never take that for granted the way some of us have." It was his public acknowledgement of the years of imbalance, and it meant everything to me. Even my mother managed to say something appropriate during her brief remarks. "Sarah, I'm sorry it took me so long to see what an amazing daughter I have. I hope you and Marcus build a beautiful life together." It wasn't a complete repair of our relationship, but it was progress. The most important moment of the day, though, came during our first dance. As Marcus and I swayed to music surrounded by all the people who truly cared about us, I realized that I felt something I'd never felt before at a family gathering. Completely, genuinely happy. "No regrets," Marcus whispered in my ear. "None," I said, and I meant it completely. The months that followed were a revelation. Marriage to Marcus was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. We bought a house together in the Wallingford neighborhood, using the money I'd been able to save once I stopped subsidizing my family's lifestyle. We traveled to Europe for our honeymoon. We hosted dinner parties for our friends. We built traditions that were ours alone. My career flourished in ways I'd never imagined possible. Without the constant emotional drain of family drama, I had energy to invest in my work that I'd never had before. I led successful campaigns for major clients, built strong relationships throughout the industry, and earned the promotion Amanda had hinted at. The woman who had been called disappointing was now running her own department and mentoring junior staff members. Some family relationships continued to improve gradually. My father and I developed a genuine friendship, talking regularly about everything from work to books to his new hobby of woodworking. Daniel made real efforts to be present in my life, calling to check in, and even asking for my advice on personal matters. My grandmother became one of my closest confidants, someone I could talk to about anything without fear of judgment. Our weekly phone calls became something I genuinely looked forward to rather than something I felt obligated to endure. My relationship with my mother remained the most complex but showed steady improvement. She still struggled with her tendency to criticize, but she caught herself more often and made genuine efforts to be supportive. When I told her Marcus and I were considering graduate school programs, me for an MBA and him for a master's in education, she surprised me by saying, "That sounds like wonderful opportunities for both of you. You'd be excellent at business strategy." It wasn't the enthusiastic support I might have gotten from Daniel or Emma, but it was respectful and encouraging, which was more than I'd ever expected from her. Emma and I found a cordial but distant equilibrium. We were polite at family gatherings and exchanged pleasantries, but we never developed the close relationship I'd hoped for. That was okay, though. I'd learned that not all family relationships can be fixed, and that's not necessarily a reflection of personal failure. The most profound change was internal. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't constantly seeking approval or trying to prove my worth. I knew who I was, what I'd accomplished, and what I brought to my relationships. Marcus's love and respect had shown me what it felt like to be valued for who I truly was, and I'd learned to value myself the same way. One evening, almost a year after our wedding, Marcus and I were having dinner when my phone rang. It was my mother, which wasn't unusual by then, but something in her voice was different. Sarah, I need to tell you something, she said. Your father and I were at the grocery store today, and I ran into Mrs. Patterson from the old neighborhood. She was asking about you, and I found myself telling her about your promotion and your new house and how proud I am of you. And then I realized, I don't think I've ever actually told you that. Told me what, Mom? That I'm proud of you, that I've always been proud of you, even when I was too stubborn or too focused on what I thought success should look like to admit it. You're an incredible woman, Sarah. You're kind and strong and successful and generous, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say that out loud. It was the conversation I'd been waiting for my entire life. And it came at a time when I no longer needed it to feel complete, which made it even more meaningful because it felt genuine rather than desperate. Thank you, Mom, I said. That means a lot. I love you, sweetheart. I should have been saying that more often, too. I love you, too. After I hung up, Marcus looked at me with a smile. How does it feel? Good, I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. It feels really good, but also, I think I would have been okay either way. And that was the real victory. Not that my family had finally learned to treat me with respect, though that was wonderful. The real victory was that I'd learned to respect myself enough to demand better treatment and to build a life that didn't depend on their approval for my happiness. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to stop accepting unacceptable behavior. I'd learned that financial independence and emotional independence go hand in hand. Most importantly, I'd learned that the family you choose can be just as important as the family you're born into, and that surrounding yourself with people who see your worth doesn't make you selfish, it makes you whole. The little girl who had spent her childhood trying to earn love had grown into a woman who knew she was worthy of love just as she was. And that made all the difference in the world. 2 years after that transformative Christmas dinner, Marcus and I celebrated our second wedding anniversary with a small party in our backyard. The guest list included both of our families, and for the first time, I felt genuinely comfortable having everyone together. My mother helped me set up decorations without making a single critical comment. My father spent the afternoon talking with Marcus about their shared love of history. Daniel brought his new girlfriend and asked for my advice about their relationship. Even Emma seemed relaxed and genuinely happy to be there. You know what strikes me about this? My grandmother said as we watched Marcus and my father laughing over something at the grill. Everyone seems so much more relaxed. It's like when you stood up for yourself, it gave everyone permission to be more authentic. She was right. The family dynamic had shifted in ways I never could have predicted. Without the underlying tension of my resentment and their unconscious guilt, we were all free to build genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I'm glad you found your voice, my Aunt Jennifer told me later that evening. But more than that, I'm glad you found yourself. As the evening wound down and our guests began to leave, my mother approached me in the kitchen where I was cleaning up. Sarah, this was lovely, she said. Thank you for including all of us. Of course, Mom, you're my family. I know we haven't always acted like it, she said quietly, but I want you to know that what you did that Christmas, it was exactly what needed to happen. It was brave, and it changed all of us for the better. It was perhaps the most self-aware thing she'd ever said to me. I'm just glad we found our way back to each other, I said. Me too, sweetheart, me too. As I watched her walk to her car, I reflected on how far we'd all come. The journey hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when I'd wondered if I'd made the right choice in confronting them so directly. But standing in my own kitchen, in the home I'd built with my husband, surrounded by the evidence of the life I'd created on my own terms, I knew I'd chosen correctly. Sometimes love requires boundaries. Sometimes family requires honesty, even when it's painful. And sometimes the most generous thing you can do is stop giving more than you can afford to give. The most important lesson I'd learned was this. You can't control how other people treat you, but you can control how much of that treatment you're willing to accept. And when you start requiring respect, you're often surprised by how many people are capable of giving it to you. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your support for granted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, Please give it a like and subscribe for more real life stories about standing up for yourself and finding your worth. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve to be treated with respect, regardless of family dynamics. Remember, you teach people how to treat you, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop accepting less than you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps someone else find the courage to speak their truth. Wishing you all the strength to know your worth and the courage to demand the respect you deserve.